Hi, I'm Simon K. Jones, and you're listening to the audio version of my weekly serial, Tales from the Triverse. And today is actually the final chapter, which is really weird. But anyway, after 4.5 years, this is where it all comes to an end. So thank you very much for reading or listening, and I'll shut up and let's get on with it. The White Horse, November 1980, London. Mid-Earth. The pub glowed in the early evening, a beacon in the gathering dark. London muttered all around, sounds of the city echoing between the buildings. Silhouettes were sat by the windows, the mottled glass preventing Clark from seeing inside. Returning to the White Horse felt like a long overdue pilgrimage. He pushed open the door, a tiny bell jangling above his head, and into the pub he went, unbuttoning his coat and removing his cap. The smell was the same as ever, that slightly damp mix of cigarettes and spilled beer, wooden floorboards creaking beneath him as he approached the bar. "Yannick Clark," said the barman, glancing up while drying glasses. Paul hadn't changed, other than a little more grey behind the ears. Clark nodded. "Paul, how are you keeping?" "I am all right, sir. What can I get you?" "Something stout and warming." "It's a cold one out there," Paul said, moving to work one of the pumps. "Storm coming in, probably." "Seems that way," Clark said, leaning on the bar. It felt like he'd never left. Paul continued drying glasses while the beer poured. "Been up to much? Haven't seen you for years." Staring at the damp bar mat, the shallow pools of beer gathering by the taps, Clark smiled as he heaved himself up onto a stool. The smile broke into a laugh, and he had to brace himself so that he didn't slide off onto the floor. "Here you go," Paul said, delivering the pint. He didn't probe further. The man knew his role. "You'll never guess," he continued. "We had the gents done up since you were last in here. Spick and span now." "Then I look forward to finding out," Clark said, lifting his glass in salute. Something had changed then. The pub otherwise was a memory, as if he'd travelled back in time to before everything in his life got turned upside down. At first it had been difficult to explain to people where he'd been, what they'd done. He'd felt obligated to include every detail, not least because of the inquiries and the awkward questions that tend to come up after deposing a theoretically elected government. After a while, outside of the formal interviews, he'd replaced detail with a shrug. It was easier than seeing the disbelief in their eyes. You, Yannick Clark, were part of that? And so he was back being Clark, retired detective, happily sipping a pint in the White Horse. He'd worried that the pub might have been damaged in the fighting or the tower collapse, but the street had escaped largely unscathed. A hand fell gently on his shoulder, and an unreasonably handsome and well-dressed man, perhaps in his late 30s, sat on the stool next to him. "Detective Clark," said the robot. "Justin." Clark extended a hand. "Glad you could make it." "This is not an occasion I would want to miss," they said, shaking his hand enthusiastically. Clark checked the time on his watch. "How long have you been in town?" Justin waved away the barman politely. "Since earlier this afternoon. Transit is still complex in terms of the paperwork, but the route has at least been cleared. I am still able to pull a few strings, as you say, despite my diminished stature." "As long as you don't go expiring on me," Clark said, harumphing. "I saw that once, remember? It wasn't pretty." Justin smiled. "I don't remember. That shard never uploaded its memory. The information you delivered for them did not include a recording of their final moments. Naturally." "Naturally." Clark took a long swig. "You are correct to inquire," Justin said. "This body is now my primary unit. With my original megaship destroyed, this shard was all that remained." It was the kind of conversation that made Clark's head hurt. It must have been hard. "When I returned from Palinor, I was shocked to discover what had happened. No megaship of our generation had ever been destroyed, so it was quite the unprecedented event. Can't you, I don't know," Clark spiraled his hand above his head, "download yourself again from the network thing?" "The totality of my memories are still stored in the network, that is correct, but a host body such as this cannot store and process that quantity of data. I would need a new megaship body, and the humans are in no hurry to build. Besides, it would still not be just enough. The unique engram patterns were particular to that mind, to that ship. Loading the raw memories onto a new ship would not recreate the same personality." Justin straightened a little. adjusted their jacket. This is who I am now, for better or for worse. Clark nodded, then pinched the bridge of his nose while he processed. So if you stayed here too long, if this host body died, that'd be it for you. Mortality at last. Justin leaned in and pretended to punch Clark's arm. Isn't it exciting? Yeah, we're all big fans of getting old. His pint ran dry. Justin raised a hand. Barkeep, if you please. Another drink for my friend. Thanks, Clark acknowledged. Here's all of us trying to live forever, and you're giggling like a schoolgirl because you've got the possibility of popping your clogs. Endings have a certain essential quality, Detective. I wonder sometimes if they are necessary in order to give context to all that came before. Context my arse. Clark thanked Paul and dived into his next drink. He'd need to have a few drinks in him for when the others arrived. You seeing anyone else while you're in town? I met with Varco upon my arrival today. They send their regards. The rebuilding efforts are ahead of schedule. Fascinating, is it not, the efforts to which the Koth community are going, despite how they were treated in this city? Yeah, Clark grunted. They're like that. We don't deserve them. Justin chuckled. Palanor is still unstable. I was there 2 weeks ago on a diplomatic mission. Being able to travel there is still such a novelty. Princess Darila is attempting to build alliances and have the city-states sign treaties. An ambitious mission. Lifting his glass, Clark held it between the two of them, as if toasting the other. What about you, Justin? What's next for the megaship that sacrificed everything and saved the day? I did not sacrifice everything, Justin said, averting their eyes momentarily. Not like Detective Styles. For here I still stand, albeit less than I once was. Everyone lost something one way or the other, if you ask me. They sat quietly for a moment, Clark running through his thoughts, as he always did, replaying events and choices, wondering what would have happened if they'd gone this way or that. What if he'd gone to Palanor with Lola? What if he'd gone up the tower instead of Zoltan? What if he'd never made it to Westminster and had been shot on the street? Your assessment is both metaphorical and literal, Detective. As for what comes next, I may go to Mars. I have memories there I would like to revisit in light of my new context. There is an observatory complex there too, which I may employ. I have a friend who is far away. Mars, eh? I might just come with you. Some of the way, at least. There's someone on Ceres I'm thinking of getting back in touch with. Maybe. Depends how much I have to drink tonight. The door jangled and there was a loud cry, announcing Nisha's arrival. Zoltan, too, coming in just behind her. Seeing the two of them always gave Clark a warmth, like they were a physical manifestation of all their successes, beating unlikely odds. Clark, you old sod, she said, rushing up to him and flinging her arms around his neck. Zoltan came up grinning, shaking first Clark's hand, then Justin's. How long has it been since we've all been in the same place? I am pleased to not be assaulting a police van this time, Justin said, without the hint of a smile. The evening rattled on, beers and orange juice were drunk, and the conversation flowed like the old days, back when they'd all been on the force, when they'd been the oddballs working out of Stamford and Coyne, solving crimes and putting bad guys away. They commandeered a couple of tables in the corner of the pub. At some point Robin arrived with Collins. Clark hadn't seen either of them since before fleeing to Mac's Earth. They both looked older, more tired, like they'd seen things. They were both alive and well, and that mattered. Wong was there, yammering on about having the opportunity to be part of the autopsy clean-up crew attending to the two megaship hulks lying amidst the rubble of the portal station. When he was properly introduced to Justin, he went a shade of red that Clark didn't recall ever before seeing on a human. Clark checked his watch. You know, Zoltan said, that it's not over, right? Not properly over. It never is. There'll be something else, someone else, to come along and fuck things up. Some rich arsehole will get too rich and rig the elections again, or buy his way to power. This will all happen again at some point. Rich arseholes thinking they're the victim, Nisha said, emptying a bag of pork scratchings into her mouth. Human society does tend to work on a cyclical basis, said Justin. I can summarise the recurring patterns if you'd like. They all shouted a collective no, and Clark thought he saw the edge of a smile on Justin's face. Shame Backer isn't here. Zoltan was looking into his beer, as if the thick, black liquid contained all the answers. Clark shook his head. Couldn't make it. He's off somewhere with Holland. Frank fucking Holland. Nisha whistled, surprisingly loud and piercing. What an asshole. Yeah, Zoltan put his arm around her. Turns out he was our asshole, though. We've all got one, Nisha said, grinning toothily at him. Again, Clark wondered at how it had shaken out like this. What would have happened if they hadn't gone to Mac's Earth? He looked at Nisha and remembered the years before exile, when she'd been spiralling into a pit. Back then she hadn't even been near hitting bottom. Getting out, running to Mac's Earth had remade her, all of them in different ways, some more than others. The tiny bell on the pub door jangled, its song. All eyes turned towards it. Lola Stiles stood in the doorway, small as ever, waving sheepishly. There was a cacophony of scraping chairs as everyone barreled towards her, enveloping her in one hug after another. Clark was last up, feeling his bones creaking, and he caught Paul's confused glance from the bar. As the others cleared a path, stepping away from her, Clark saw Lola and felt a surge of what he assumed was happiness, joy without caveats. There were no frayed fears around the margins, no reluctance to hope. It had been so long he'd forgotten what it was like. "Sorry I'm late," she said. "This is the second time you've come back from the dead. Don't do it again. Don't come back or don't die. Shut up." She wrapped her arms around him and squeezed tight. He closed his eyes, put a hand on her back, another on her head. That they were both alive, that any of them were alive, was an impossibility. A new round of drinks was acquired for the whole group as they settled back into their corner of the pub. Even D.I. Morgan and D.I. Ford showed up, though Walpole was locked into an all-night session at Westminster. He'd picked up where Graves left off. Clark sat quietly while the conversation flowed, looking at each of them, taking in their faces, wondering how many times they'd saved each other, at how none of it would have been possible without all of them. So many different ways it could have gone sideways. He stood and raised his glass. The room fell silent. "To John Callaghan," he said. "Hear, hear," Ford said, thumping the table. "To absent friends." The pub had cleared out, and Lola Stiles sat at the bar with Yannick Clark. Paul was putting glasses away, finishing up the till, clearing tables. Seeing everybody after so many months had been a relief. After she'd put herself back together, her first decision had been to visit London as soon as possible. That was after she'd drifted like dust, energetic particles propelled back through from London, imbued with the absorbed energies of a dying megaship. The power of a sun had torn her apart, as well as reconstituted her. That's what she was told, at least, by Slava, by Darila, when they'd found her walking the battle-ravaged streets of Brulia. It had taken months to be more than a bundle of flesh and bone, longer for her to be Lola once more. As she recovered in the palace, they had told her of all that had transpired. Probably better, and just enough, the march in London, the Joint Council Tower coming down, the British government overthrown, Maxwell on the run, Hutchinson in custody, Secretary-General Hamilton Gordon under investigation. She'd learned of Eric's, Rexon's and Graves's deaths, and that Clark, Nisha, Zoltan were all alive. The plan had worked. The cost was high, but it could have been higher. She felt a little drunk. "So, you're retired?" Clark snorted. "They had to reinstate me first, all forgiven, etc. Then the first thing I did was retire." He smiled. "They'll reinstate you as well if you let them know you're alive, if that's what you want." Taking in a deep breath, she stretched out her arms. "I don't think so," she said. "There's still lots to do on Palinor." London was now a place she visited. Home was elsewhere. "Yeah," Clark said, nodding. "I'm thinking I'll head to Mac's Earth. Got something to check on." "Oh, yeah?" She raised her eyebrows. "None of your business." She blew a raspberry at him. Paul rang the bell. Finishing his pint, Clark put the glass slowly and carefully back down on the bar. "Seems like it's never really over. There's always something." "You sound like Zoltan." She drew air quotes above her head and put on an accent. "The world is so shit, oh woe." He shrugged. "Maybe it'll be a bit less shit if we keep working at it." "How long for?" thanks for listening, and thanks for listening or reading the whole of Tales from the Triverse. If you've jumped on halfway through, the whole thing is up on the newsletter at simonkjones.substack.com, so you can go back to the start, read the whole thing. There's if you're a paid subscriber, you can get an ebook collection and stick that on your tablet or what have you, which is a bit more convenient. And I've got big plans for turning it into a proper, polished up series of ebooks and paperbacks, so keep an eye out for that as well. Not sure how long that will take, but yeah. It's been a long journey. I'm going to be writing a lot about finishing up and what it's like to hit the tail end of a 4.5-year serial. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with myself, but I guess I'll find out. Okay, thanks again.